A poor single mother struggles to take her sick baby battling cancer to the hospital on foot after everyone is unkind to her. One day, a Good Samaritan comes her way with a kind gesture she never imagined. Before we continue, please take some time to subscribe to Dailydose, like and share this video with your friends. It might brighten their day and inspire them to do good. Also keep watching because an important lesson awaits at the end of the video. Betty had seen better days. The ones with Raul. Those were the best days of her life. He was her best friend, husband, and everything she wanted in a man. Everything seemed just fine. And then, extraordinarily perfect when Betty fell pregnant. This was something Raul had always wanted, a child to bear more than just his name. Like all fathers, he wanted his baby to come out safe and sound. He went with Betty to all her checkups and was more concerned about the child. It was their first baby after several futile attempts to conceive. Then one day, a piece of terrible news awaited him. What? It can't be. Nobody in my family has had this. Raul was alarmed when the doctor told him about the multiple abnormalities detected during the ultrasound. Mr. Turner, you need to calm down. It can be cured with treatment, but it is possible only after the baby is born, the doctor explained, but Raul was too shocked to hold himself together. Later that evening, he mustered the courage and approached Betty to convince her to terminate her pregnancy. He did not have an option but to make the difficult choice because he was afraid to raise a sick child. Are you crazy? This is our baby and our first child. It's a blessing, and we will be parents for the first time. How could you tell me this? Betty cried, but nothing changed Raul's mind. Soon, it was Betty's turn to make a choice. She and Raul filed for a divorce after she chose her baby over their marriage and him. Betty knew it would be difficult to cope without Raul, but she still wanted to keep the baby. Months later, Betty gave birth to a beautiful girl baby who she named Jeannie and took her to her late mother's house 2 weeks later. Although she was overjoyed, she faced a mighty blow when her baby's health began to deteriorate shortly. The scans further revealed that baby Jeannie had cancer and had to start treatment very soon. Betty was haunted and started taking her baby to the hospital located several miles away to initiate the treatment. She did not have any personal mode of transport and heavily relied on her neighbors and friends for rides to the hospital. Though they were initially kind to her, they refused to help her when her requests for rides became frequent. Sorry, Bet, but I'm busy, some of her friends said. My car is out of fuel. Sorry, her neighbor said. Those were just excuses, and humanity had slowly started to fail the poor mother. But Betty wouldn't give up and was ready to do anything to save her child. So she started taking the bus to the hospital. But then, not everybody was kind to her. People made faces whenever she boarded the bus with her baby. Some were downright rude and even told her off to silence her crying child because they felt she was disturbing and noisy. Will you shut your baby up, lady? I'm trying to talk on the phone here. A man was rude to her on the first day when she took the bus. Betty shrugged it off and switched seats. Sometimes she would just ignore people. But that didn't help in the days that came. Every other day, someone or the other always pulled long faces and grumbled when she got onto the bus with baby Jeannie. Poor Betty could not take it anymore. She could not stand strangers telling her baby off only because she cried. They were all babies once. Didn't they cry? And don't they have babies that cry? My baby is not an alien. There's nothing new in a baby crying. What a cruel world. She was disappointed. Betty stopped taking the bus. Instead, she started visiting the hospital on foot, pushing her baby in the stroller. While reaching the clinic would take half an hour by bus, it took Betty nearly 2 hours on foot. It was challenging and exhausting, but the mother never gave up. However, her health deteriorated one day due to constant walking and exhaustion. Betty had already had a bad day at the hospital. Baby Jeannie cried a lot, and it took her a lot of time to comfort her. On the way home, Betty blacked out and fell on the road. Luckily, a Good Samaritan passing by in his car saw Betty and rushed to her aid. Hey, are you all right? He said, splashing water on her face. Betty awakened and thanked him before leaving with her baby, but the man was still concerned and offered her a ride. Although reluctant, Betty knew she could not walk further and agreed. "I'm Mark, and you?" He introduced himself. "Betty, and this is my daughter Jeannie." At the end of the ride, Betty and Mark exchanged more about themselves. As it turned out, Mark was a rich businessman who had recently launched a charity fund for children fighting cancer in honor of his late son, who died of leukemia. He was divorced and devoted his free time to philanthropic activities. After learning about Betty's struggles, he decided to help her in some way, but didn't know how. Then suddenly, an idea flashed in his mind. Mark stepped down from his car and called Betty back after dropping her outside her gate. "Do you know how to drive a car?" he asked Betty. "Yeah, I do. Why are you asking me that?" "Because I'll be coming here tomorrow, and you can keep my car." Betty was stunned. She knew nothing about Mark other than he was a kind man who had divorced his wife and lost his son. "I am sorry, but I cannot accept it. Who would give their car to a stranger?" Betty refused, but Mark knew what he was doing. "Look, I have another car. I can even buy a new one anytime, but I feel you need a car more than I do. Please accept it. You no longer have to walk. Think about your baby. Will you still walk with her during the rain? When it snows? Please take my car." Betty's silence planted a smile on Mark's face, and he left, promising to be back the next day. Mark kept his word and returned to visit Betty again. He gave her his car keys, and a few days later, registered his car in her name. Betty was so shuddered by Mark's kindness. She had lost faith in humanity, but it moved her when she realized kind people like Mark still existed. As time passed, Betty and Mark met often. They became best friends, and their love for baby Jeannie drew them even closer. Although Betty had a rough patch in her previous marriage, she decided to give herself another chance when Mark proposed to her. Several months later, they married in a low-key wedding, promising each other they would do anything to save their daughter's life. A year passed, and Jeannie managed to win her battle with cancer. Even today, 12 years later, Betty feels everything that happened in her life was a dream. She is forever grateful to Mark for lighting up her life.